Should we just let them eat cake? Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Friends, welcome to our Last Days Beacon program for today. This is David Schnitker. The purpose of our program, indeed the purpose of our entire ministry, is to equip you as an end-time saint. Thanks for tuning in. It is a great privilege to have Bill Olson on the show today. Bill is a constitutional attorney in the Washington, D.C. area. His law firm is on the front lines of liberty in America's courts. As such, his firm has brought more than 100 cases before the Supreme Court. And we're going to be discussing one of those cases in just a few minutes. But first, I want to welcome Bill to the program. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be with you to talk about these important matters.
For those who are regular listeners to our podcast, we have had Bill on the program a few times in the past. But for those who are not familiar with your work, tell us about your law firm and give our listeners your web address.
Well, we have a fairly small law firm in Washington area in Northern Virginia. We have offices in Winchester, Virginia, and Vienna, and we're been active in the public policy arena, trying to advance biblical principles for many, many years. One of the lawyers in our firm is Herbert W. Titus, former dean of Regent Law School, founding dean there, and a great constitutional scholar. And we've hoped to try to advance important principles that otherwise wouldn't get voice. We also have a website, Law and Freedom. That's Law and Freedom, and that is where all of our briefs, several hundred actually, are available and all indexed and tagged and easily retrievable.
I've spent some time on your website, lawandfreedom.com, and it is a veritable primer, perhaps encyclopedia of knowledge regarding constitutional law. So even apart from the specific cases, I've derived great benefit from spending time on your website. Now, speaking of websites, you have another web venture that I want to remind our listeners about, and that is a website entitled biblicalgrid.com. Tell us about that website, Bill.
Well, we started that as Christian and conservative groups were having more and more trouble getting their websites listed in Google returns, and Facebook was censoring people, and we just thought it was going to be more and more difficult for the body to be able to have access to some of the better websites that contained perhaps controversial information. And today, things that are biblical tend to be increasingly controversial. So we picked about 300 websites that we believed were doing excellent work, and even if Google doesn't want to promote them on their search engine, we'll promote them. So if you have an interest in a different area and look up biblicalgrid.com, you may well find several websites you've never heard of before that promote the same kind of values you share.
And if our listeners forget the web address, biblicalgrid.com, they can go to our ministry's website, SWPM.us, and they will find the link to your biblicalgrid.com on our homepage. And Bill, I am flattered to see that our humble ministry is one of those listed on biblicalgrid.com. So
exactly the kind of organization that we're trying to promote.
So I guess it's a case of the proverbial, you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. So we all benefit from it, and I enjoy going to biblicalgrid.com, and I've learned about some new websites as a result of that. Well, thank you for your efforts that way. Now let's get down to business. We're going to be talking today and next week about what has been called the gay cake decision, a provocative term, but it is a verdict that was recently rendered in the Supreme Court. Probably most of our listeners have heard of it, but we don't want to assume anything. let's talk about, first of all, before we get into the specifics of the case, what role did your law firm have in this gay cake case?
Well, the case was litigated by a Christian legal fund operating nationally out in the Southwest, and we got involved in this case early, as we have many other cases involving religious liberties of businesses to be able to conduct their businesses in accordance with biblical principles. And we thought that certain issues were being ignored and neglected. So after the case came out of the administrative law system in Colorado, we filed a petition, an amicus brief in support of a petition to have the Colorado Supreme Court review it. And when that was unsuccessful, filed a brief in the U.S. Supreme Court. So we filed 2 briefs so far in this case, and the decision now has come out by the Supreme Court, and that's, of course, what we're discussing today.
Well, we're going to hold our listeners till next week so we can get into the specifics of this case and get your evaluation of it and the implications of that. So I think we've reached a good stopping point for today. We've piqued our listeners' interest, and so we'll pick up next week. So, Bill, thanks for joining me on today's show.
Thank you so much, David.
Friends, we will continue this discussion on next week's program as we dig deeper into the gay cake discussion and what it means for your religious liberty. Until then, this is David Schnitker. Thanks for listening.